Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Brachas. In the Ois V'Hadr's edition, we are learning today Daf Yud Dalid, even though we left off really on Daf Yud Gimel Amid Beis, 3 lines before the bottom of the Amid, otherwise known as Perek Aleph in the Sugya of Halacha Hey. We will begin learning a case where we don't have to modify our behavior out of fear that others might misunderstand what is and end up doing wrong. In other words, we don't make up our own maras ayins. And as we'll have an example of something that I will suggest is perhaps very relevant to a behavior that we have nowadays, as we'll speak out. We're going to then go back to the Mishnah on Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis. The Mishnah uses the words that Makim Shanahagu Laharich, we're not allowed to be Makatzir. If there's a bracha that's Bekitzur, we're not allowed to make it long. We'll see how we learned it correctly so in the Mishnah, and we're going to learn a brisa that uses the same words with another application, which is the Gemara is really trying to point that out. What laharuch lakatzin means in the Mishnah is aleph. What laharuch lakatzin means in the brisa is something completely different, which will lead into the topic in the brisa of whether is one allowed to add their own words in the blessings of Shemona Esrei. And mamish me'inyan le'inyan, whether you could add words, whether you should not add words, we're going to go into when do we bow down during the Shemona Esrei, and we'll explain al pi Chasidus how this is really the same inyan. How the word bracha means to be mavrich, to bring down godliness. Bowing down is an externalization of the concept of taking something lofty, one's mind, and bringing it down. And we're going to have a discussion here, similar but different to a discussion that we had in Bavli Brachas regarding the different types of bowing downs that we found in the Beis HaMikdash that we have in Yiddishkeit. All right, we're going to have a pasuk regarding Shlomo HaMelech that when he concluded the building of the first Beis HaMikdash, so it says certain words that he davened after he was mikroya al birkov, after he was kneeling on his knees. We have a pasuk in Divrei Hayamim where the word is not to be michroya or mikroya metachav al birkov, but it's vayavrech bricha al birkov. So you have kriya, you have bricha, you have ishtachava. If you remember in Bavli, we learned not only in brachas, but really we learned, I think, in Sutta, in Sukkah, and we learned in Megillah how Levi was demonstrating to Rebbe Kida, and he got wounded and he got injured. And we're going to go over that topic. We're going to see Machlokes Babel Yerushalmi Pashat how to interpret the words and the difference of different types of kneeling. And we will today at least begin. The final topic will be the topic of Moedim D'Rabbanan. This is a topic that we have in Soita Daf Mem. Moedim D'Rabbanan, interestingly, is a part of Tefillah that was not composed by the Anshe Knesset HaGdolah, as the Rambam writes, Mehem Neviim u'Mehem Chachamim, but it was fully composed by the Rabbanan, by the Amoyroim, not by the Chachamim Bisman Hagamara, why we call it Moedim D'Rabbanan, not from the Anshe Knesset HaGdolah. Also, as we learned in the Bavli, as we learn here in the Yerushalmi, we're going to learn 4 different nuschos of the Moedim D'Rabbanan. We will go through some of the 4 today, and we will, God willing, conclude the latter and the 4th and the topic in tomorrow's daf on daf Tez Vav. So let's come back to the beginning. As we mentioned, we are starting a relatively new topic. It's about a potential marasayin that Rabbi Yechanan does not subscribe to. We are in the Ois V'Hadar again on Daf Yud Gimel Amid Beis, 3 lines before the bottom of the Amid in the beginning of the mind. Today we learned the following in a brisa. Now, to introduce this brisa, what Pashat B'Hashgacha process it works out. If you want to take a look at the Charedim, 6 lines under the Gemara. All right, this is just as an intro to our topic. We already quoted above, and this is written properly in Bavli Yuma Daf Lamed Zayin, the following words that Hakoyre Shema. I'm reading from the Charedim just to get an intro. That Hakoyre Shema im Anshe Mishmar. That if a person is going to recite the morning Shema at the same time that the members of the Mishmar, which are the Kahanim and the Leviim during the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash, when they recite the Shema, lo yatsa. Why is that? Because the people of the Mishmar, they are occupied in doing the Avodah. They only begin the Shema not from the earliest time, which is Mishayakid, if you remember. They recite the Shema even earlier. And if someone who doesn't have the justification of, they're working in the Beis HaMikdash, they're members of the Mishmar, and they said, and that time, they're not Yoitze. That is what we have. That's a Mishnah that is brought down in Yuma Daf Lamed Zayin. Now, this Braisa is speaking about something which should not be confused with Anshe Mishmar. We're learning now about Hakoyre im Anshe Mamod. What's the Anshe Maimod? Anshe Maimod means, as the Mahara Fulda reminds us, that since it says in Bamidbar Chav Ches and Pinchas, Tishmeru lahakriv, which means that the owner of a carbon should stand over their carbon while it's being offered by the Kohanim. And therefore, the Karbanos Tzibur, theoretically, all of the Tzibur should be there when these Karbanos are brought. But you can't have all the Jewish people fitting in the Beis HaMikdash, not going to work every day, morning at night, even though somehow today we're figuring out how never to go to work every day, Baruch Hashem, another Yantiv. So what did we do? We designated representatives from the Jewish people. They were also divided into 24 we call ma'amadois, and they stood over the avoid of the karbanis. Now, says the Braisa that hakoyre im anshe maimad, if someone is going to recite the Shema with those people, not with the anshe mishmat, with the anshe maimad, the anshe mishmat recited it prior to the Mishayakim, too early. Certainly on a lechatchila level too early. The Anshe Maimed only said the Shema after they finished their avoid of standing over the Talmud. So it says the Braisa, if you read it with them, lo yotz. Why are you not yotz? When exactly did they read it? So here we have a machlokes. We have enough time between the Rash Sirilio and the Charedim. So let's begin with the Rash Sirilio. So if you look under the Gemara all the way in the bottom, on the second column, 4 lines before the bottom, says the Rashi Rilio, Uma'achrim likreis at kalois avodas atam. They, the Anshe Maimed, ha'isik b'mitzvah patim and mitzvah. While they're standing there, they're not saying anything. When would they do it? When they finish bringing the Talmud. When was that? After the Nates. After the Nates. So hold on. So why does the Braisa say you're not Yoitze? Why are you not Yoitze? No, the Braisa says the words Kima Achrim hoyu, because they were recited too late. How is it too late? So says the Rashi Rilio, we had before a Mishnah Machloikas. Until when can you read the morning Shema? First opinion was Netzachama. But then Rabbi Yeshua says until the end of the 3rd hour. We touch the end of the 3rd hour. Says that Rashi Rilio, this Braisa does not follow Rabbi Yeshua. According to Rabbi Yeshua, you can read the Shema until the end of the 3rd hour. It means that if you're following the Shita that says that Shema should be recited up until the Netzachama and not later, then the Anshe Maimah, they had an excuse. They can follow Rabbi Yeshua because they were doing the mitzvah of being maimed over the karbanis. But you are doing it at that time. You're not yoytze kima achramay. That works. Problem is the charedim. The charedim, 3 lines before the bottom. Since we already said above that we paskin like Rabbi Yeshua, guys, we paskin like Rabbi Yeshua. We are allowed to say Shema until the end of the 3rd hour. So it says that that again, hakoydim anshe maimed lo yotze kima achramay. They only read it after they finished bringing the Talmud. And now the Kvar Avra Oynas Kriya Shema, it's already too late. And here he quotes the Mishnah that in other words, this implies that the Anshe Maimed only read the Shema after 3 hours. They had an excuse, but we are not allowed to do it. But we have no such excuse. No. So he asks the questions on himself. 1 second. Why did it take them so long to bring the Talmud? It didn't work that way. Did we not learn in Psachim, Daf Nun Ches, that the avoid of the Talmud took 1 hour? The Shoyim be'esek Talmud shal bein arbayim sha'achas bilvad. Now I know we're speaking about the Talmud shal shachar. So what? So what? So you're going to say because they davened, we learned yesterday the Braisa. Okay, so it took a little bit more time. So that's a kash. Elama, this Braisa Takathor understands that the Talmud shel shachar took 3 hours plus. Depends on what shul you daven. How long does it take you to daven shachris? Maybe that's the machlokes. Anyways, that's the Braisa. Now, go ahead. Okay, Zog the Gemara. Misha Yaakov, according to everyone. According to Rabbi Eliezer, I think it was on Sachamiyah. Probably an hour. If Alois HaShachar is 72 minutes, it's probably an hour. Hour is a long time. But you see how organized God wants us to be every day on the day, every day on the day. You have to get up, that hour. You got to wake up and you got to say Birchas Kriya Shema, and you got to go to the mikveh, but you can do that before, and you got to say the Shema. Okay, now says the Gemara, Zayda b'Shem Rabbi Ami tells us that the Yoimei de Rabbi Yechanan during the lifetime of Rabbi Yechanan, Haveinon Nafkan Letanisa, when we would go out to say the special prayer during fast days. And guys, this is a topic that we learned in Masechtas Tainis, that whenever there were fast days at a certain point, so many people came to daven that we davened in the street. And everyone was gathered. And in the Shmoyna Esrei, instead of saying 8 Shmoyna Esrei, 18, today 19, they would add 6 brachas. If you remember, they would extend the Goy Eil Yisrael. And then, before the Fa'enu, they would add another 6 brachas. So says the Gemara that then they would read the Shema after 3 hours. By the time they gathered everyone, just to get the flow, they would say the Shema after 3 hours. And yet, Rabbi Yechanan was not moicha. Rabbi Yechanan did not make a protest. Now we have to understand, first of all, how can people say Shema after Zman Shema? And what is there to protest that Rabbi Yechanan Chiddush did not protest? So to understand this, again, there's time. Let's read again. Let's go back to Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis. Go to the last line. Let's read the Charedim. He explains everything. The tiny is Tzara Sibur. First of all, everyone Charedim, they would go daven in the street. Lispalo Daf Yud Daled on the top. Lispalo Shel Kol Yoim Shmoyna Esrei, as we spoke out. First of all, adds the Charedim. Don't you think that they didn't read the Shema Bisman? Of course they did. They read the Shema B'Oinos, but they didn't daven Shmoyna Esrei. Shmoyna Esrei they davened in this big gathering, which means that they were not Soymech Kula L'Tfilah. Guys, when you read the Shema in the morning, Kim Mitzvasa, you have to read it with its brachas. Shtaim Shalofanel. They knew that until everyone gathers, and they wanted everyone to gather, it's going to be after 3 hours. So first, the chiddush really is that they felt that it's better to daven that 24 bracha amida with everyone present, even though it will mean that you won't be soimer gula l'tfilah. Shema they read at time, of course, with the brachas. Why? Because they needed to wait. And which is the Oines Kriya Shema. What about davening? Oh, davening you can daven later. About Tfilah Shininu say that Tfilah Shachar at Chatzois. And indeed, to back up the Pshat, the Charedim says, I found in the Rambam that writes that there were times, in other words, even though we learned about the 3 kifois and how important it is, but there are times that you won't be Shlomo Kula L'Tfilah. Now, if they already read the Shema, why would they read it in public? Why would they read it again? Next Charedim. V'kari Kriya Shema, anachnu v'chol hatzibur, af al pi shekaro oiseh b'oinasam, choizrim v'koyrim ato kedei la'amoid v'tfilah m'ter divrei Torah. We learned this on Daf Beis in the Yerushalmi. Just like by Mincha, we don't say Shemona Esrei, we say Ashtei Shemona Esrei, even when you already fulfilled the obligation of Shema, or even if you're davening too early and you're not fulfilling the obligation and you're not saying Shema with its brachos, but before Shemona Esrei, you have to say something. You can't go straight into Shemona Esrei. So by these fast days, they would gather, they would say Shema, Shemona Esrei. When would they read the Shema? After 3 hours. Now you understand why one would have argued it's a problem. What might have been the problem? The observer, what does he see? He sees the whole oilam getting together. It's 10 a.m. It's after the Zman of Shema, and they're saying Shema and Shemona Esrei. What might that person think? That Shema b'di'eved could be said after 3 hours. Rabbi Yechanan was not afraid of that. Rabbi Yechanan knows, everyone knows that the slaves by Kriya Shema is early. Everyone knows that even when the tzibur is saying Shema in public later, it's not because they didn't say it earlier. You have to say it earlier. That's the pshat. The final charedim that we're reading, Why would they be moicha? Maybe a commoner will make a mistake by thinking that you don't have to be so medagdik in this man krishma. He was not afraid of that. Now let's go back and read inside the Gemara. So I want to make a link by Yos and Shul. Let me just read the story. Not everyone was with Rabbi. Other Amoraim were concerned. Rabbi Yosef and Rabacha once nafkin letanisa. They once went out on a fast day and also tzibura and umikrei shma basat talashain. And when that happened, boy, Rabacha wanted to protest. He wanted to protest right away. Only Rabbi Yosef, hold on, don't make a protest. What do you think? The people over here don't know what they're doing. Everyone read the Shema early. Don't you know that the only reason why we are repeating it again is, again, like this is a constant theme that we have in the Yerushalmi. So why would you object? So Amalei Rabacha says, I'll tell you why. Because of the hedyoitos. They would not think that this is the first time they're reading it, and this is correct to read it at this time. So he was concerned. Rabbi Yechanan was not concerned. So the link is Pashat, today, Min Hagenu in Chabad and Shabbos is to daven in the shul, to begin the davening late. Many minyanim they begin the minyan after Zman Kriya Shema. But we are educated that you wake up in the morning, after Birchas HaShachar, you say the Shema. So what's the concern? I know that today it's different. Today when we read the Shema Kimitzvasa before the Zman, we don't do it with the brachas. That's another topic for right now. We leave the Siddur the way it is. But the Shema itself, we read B'oinos, and that's the mitzvah. When we're reading the Shema and the davening, that's Shema and the davening. That's not the mitzvah of reading the Shema, because that means it's too late. Should we be concerned that people are going to think, people are going to learn that you don't have to make sure to say the Shema? That's the topic over here. And we are going on the shoulders of Rabbi Yechanan. Okay. Before we go on to the next topic, I want to go back to that few Beis Amid Beis, and in the Mishnah, just to show you how the same words have different meanings. In middle of the Mishnah, what we call halacha hey. The Mishnah writes like this: Daf Yud Beis Amid Beis, the second line from the top. Makim she'amru laharich eina rashoya lekatzer. Reading the Pnei Moshe. Wherever laharich means, what does a long bracha mean in the Mishnah? Any bracha that has the words Baruch Ata Hashem in the beginning and Baruch Ata Hashem at the end, like the first bracha of Birchas Hamazon. So if that's what Chazal said, begin and end with the Baruch, don't cut a Baruch out. Now, lekatzer, if Chazal said you only say Shema Malchus once, like Birchas HaMitzvahs, Birchas HaNehenen, or in Birchas Hamazon, the second bracha, because of the rule of the bracha Smucha L'Chaverta, if you ended Baruch Ata Hashem, Hazvan Asar, you don't begin Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu Malachayim Noidelecha. Or like in Shemona Esrei, what was the katzed and laharich in the Mishnah means that long means Shema Malchus in the beginning and at the end. Kitzur means you only mention God's name once and leave it exactly the way. You cannot change anything. The Braisa is going to use the same words. It means something else, and the Braisa actually is saying that a bracha that's long, you can make it even longer. Only a bracha that's short, you have to leave short. What do these words mean in the Braisa? It means, are we allowed to add our own words in a bracha? Or do we say that kol hamashana mimadbeya shetova chachamim eina elotoya is so meduyek that leave it exactly the way it is? And the Braisa says that brachas that were composed by the Anshe Knesset Gdolah long, you can add to it. The brachas that are, I'm going to add the word relative, but they're called bekitzer, then you have to leave them exact. The Braisa is not arguing in the Mishnah. The Braisa is using the words for a different meaning. If it's laharich, you can be even more ma'arich. If it's bekitzer, then you have to leave it. Now, let's go. Makim shenaru laharich says the Gemara. The Gemara is quoting a Braisa. In the Bavli, we would have Tana Rabbanan. You got it, guys? That few dalit. Elu brachas shemarichin behem. The following brachas are the brachas that the Braisa that says prior to this that if the bracha is a lengthy one, you can make it even longer. What are those? The Birchais Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippurim. We're speaking about Musaf, right? We just came off the high holidays, and what do we have over there? We have not one bracha in the middle of the first three and the last three, like we have on Shabbos and Yom Tov, but we have three brachas: Malchias, Zechronis, and Shofros, and V'nemar, and V'nemar. And you want to go home to eat a Nachav V'nemar, and if you want to add another V'nemar, Gesund Heit. Actually, our minig is to sing the Venemar. We're being marach. We're making it longer. They made it long, make it longer. Now, another birchas tainis table. We actually just mentioned this, right? The sugi and tainis that the 6 brachas that are added. Oh, there you can add. But Abed, if it's not those, let's make an inference from the Reish. If it's not these very long ones, you're not allowed to make it long. Now the Braisa says, "Mi berchoisav shel adam," from the way a person recites his brachas nikar, you can discern im Talmud chachamu, because he knows the few exceptions when you can make it even longer and when you may not, or if the person is abur, a veisnish. So he thinks that he's doing a big thing, he's adding words. Who told you can add words? Now comes the seif of the Braisa. And the seif of the Braisa in inference is contradicting the Reish. The Reish says you can be marach on those. We mentioned only 4. The 3 of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur by Yom Kippur is Yom Kippur of Yovel. Not our Yom Kippur is not big. It becomes big because of Shamnu, Baganu, Chatanu, Avinu, Pashanu, but because of the Vidui. It means Yom Kippur means on Yovel, the Musaf was mamish the nusach of Rosh Hashanah with Malchus and Shefes. Okay, now says the Braisa, these are the ones shemekatzin behen means not that you make it shorter. It means you have to leave them short. Again, that would imply, guys, that anything that's a little bit longer than these you could add. That will be an inherent stira. But let's go. Which ones? Mekatzin means you have to leave them the way the Chachamim made them. Hamabarach ala mitzvahs. It's really one-liners. Laniach tefillin, right? Al mitzvah sitzes, lisat sitzes, al natilas lulav, apedus, vayripriya eitz. We're talking about very little. Now comes a little bit longer. Birchas hazimun. Birchas hazimun, guys, is navarach shachalnu mishaloi. Not navarach shachalnu v'shesavanu v'shesodise v'shesazat. No, just say those words. We talked about the zimun before. U'brach achrenu shel birchas hamaz and achar hamaz. These are called small brachas. Now, first of all, you see over here that small doesn't mean what you mean. Doesn't mean the way we think. It's not the number of the words. The problem is what are we referring to? Are we referring to the 4th bracha? So what's very interesting is that the Charedim actually holds that the bracha achroina shel birchas hamazon achar hamazon is referring to the 4th bracha. It's called the small bracha. How is that called the small bracha? That's the longest bracha. Oh, so that's good to know. So both the Charedim and the Rashi, they write something which is good to know. That really, the harachamans that we begin saying later are not part of the bracha. That's something separate. And that grew a beard that we add and we add and we add. But from Baruch Hashem L'Kev okay, Lavinu Malkeinu Adirenu, there's a certain theme that has to be verbalized, which is we have to mention. I'm reading inside the Charedim. Sholosh Malchiyos, Sholosh Gemulois. I'm sorry, Sholosh Shah in the feminine. The Shloisha Hatavois. The Charedim writes, Umasha Moisifan Ha'amor Achman, Eina B'chlal HaBracha V'tosu B'yada. Hinoch writes, it's not a mistake. From this Brais.
So some people answer Amen to Rachman.
I'm not even talking about answering Amen. Let's go like this. The Ikir fourth bracha that we call Hatoivu. The Hatoivu Meitiv, it ends before you begin the first Arach. And that which is said there, okay, Lavinu Malkeinu Adanenu Badanenu Umi Kotuv Lo'olam Alech Hasreinu. That's the end. And in that you have to compact. You have to mention 3 Malchiyos, 3 Gemulos, 3 Atavos, and it's Mitzkitzir, Mitzumtzum. It's every word is exact, and don't touch that. That's what we're saying. Now, it's getting a little bit late, but in the Bavli, the Gemara would word what the Charedim says in the next piece, that there's a kasha, stida from Nesha L'Seifa. The Nesha says, 4, you could add which and plus. Let's go. There's long, the short is intermediate. The Braisa didn't speak about the intermediate. What would be the intermediate? Shmona Esrei. So the Nesha is mashma, only the long you can add, meaning the intermediate, Miresha, you cannot add. When the Seifa says only in the short do you have to leave, is mistaber from the Seifa. Intermediate you could add. So which one is it? That's Hasha'ar Kol Brachas. Or the Meirech asks the Gemara, answers the Gemara, the diuk from the Seifa is the diuk. Answers the Gemara, I take it back. The diuk of the reish is the diuk. Only in the first four that the Braisa mentioned, which is the three of Rosh Hashanah, right? And in the and Birchas Tainas Tzibur. Really, that's another 6. Only there can you add. And nothing else can you add. And nothing else can you add. How do I know that? Amar Chizkiah, min man detani. From that which we learn in another Braisa, that Hamaydech, whoever lengthens the blessings, if you add anything to what Chazal said, Harei meguna. No, you don't appreciate the amount of Ruach HaKodesh and precision that went into the brachas. This is a big statement that we need in our generation. When the big Chachamim are tampering Rachmana litzlan with the Siddur, how can you say Shelo Yisana Isha? How can you do this? Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, Elokei Sarah Rivka Rachav Leah, and all these shtusim that people are doing, they don't understand that it was written b'nevuah. If you have an issue, take it up with God. You have an issue with what the Torah writes, okay, we have to understand it. You can have a good kasha. We don't have to have the answer to kashas. But the solution is not to change something that's divine in origin. If you leave it the way it is, it is a meshuba. In other words, generally the rule is don't touch the blessings. In other words, which means that the inference of the Sefer is not to be learned that only in the little ones should you leave it. And let me add something. What's that ayah is that even in the Sefer they spoke about the Hatoiv Meitiv. Hatoiv Meitiv is not that short. Hatoiv Meitiv is not shorter than a Brach and Shemona Esrei. Okay. Problem is like this. When could be, but there are some, when could be Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur of Yovel, and in the Tainis Sibur. Now, in the Tainis Sibur, really what happens is like this. Let me go back to Tainis. In Goyel Yisrael, the Einov Onyenu, they would add something in it, and then they would add 6 others. Then they would add 6 others. Now, it says in a Braisa that Sorech Laharech B'Goyel Yisrael B'Tainis. You actually should add over there. Now, does that not imply only in that you can add, but not in the other 6? That doesn't make sense. First of all, the Braisa says clearly in the 6 that you add. And second of all, I would argue that Goyel Yisrael is the standard bracha. The fact that we had a few liners in there about the tzara, say that the other 6 are mamish unique for Tainis Sibur. So why not add custom made for the tzara that we're at? That's the kasha. Answers the Gemara, no, you don't understand that. Of those 6, for sure you're might. The chiddush of the Braisa is that even in the Goyel Yisrael, since Chazal told you that you should add something in that bracha for a fast day, you can add then any other words that you want. Amar Rabbi Yossi, Shaloi Toimar. One should not say that what? Even though we learned the Masechtas Tainis that on a fast day you add in the bracha of Goyel Yisrael, but the beginning and the end is part of the standard Shemona Esrei. So you might have thought that when are you allowed to add only in the 6 between Re'eh and Refo'en, but not in the Re'eh, Lo Yarech Ba. So the Fum Kain Sarach Lemer, the Tana of the Braisa tells you that you not only could, but therefore should even add in Goyel Yisrael and Avada in all of the other 6. And let me say some Hasidic words over here, which will lead us into the next topic. The word bracha means to bless. It means to draw something down. How do we draw godliness down onto the world? We do it by creating kalim, words. The words of the Shemona Esrei are the channels through which the Eibishter becomes more revealed in this world. What do we understand of creating channels for godliness? Nothing. The Chazal understood. In other words, the reason why it's so important to leave it the way it is because the main purpose of Shemona Esrei is not to talk to God, because if the purpose would have been to talk to God, then no one will limit how you can talk. Talk what you need to talk. Dafke because bracha miloshen hamshacha pi chasidus. That's why I understand you're not allowed to. You have to leave it the way it is, and that is just the link. And mashenkin by a fast day, no mashal. By a fast day, we're talking to God. We want to say supplications. If I'm telling my tzaras to the Eibishter, no one is going to legislate what I could or cannot say. Say what's on your heart. And Echnami, well, first of all, by the way, we paskin that in Shmakalena you could add a little bit if it's Shmakalena, and if you're adding before the Yehuladot of the second, you add a lot. No, it's just understand if it's about Milmato Lamaila, there's no restrictions. there can be restrictions. How can you restrict a person's heart? The reason why we're so meduyek is anything whose kavanah is to bring something down. The only way we can bring it down, we don't know how to do these things. Everyone wants to bring godliness down. How do you do a mitzvah? God gives a mitzvah. Oh, that is connected to the next topic. The next topic is bowing down. What's bowing down? Bowing down also is an externalization of drawing godliness down. Bowing down. So only in the following do you bow. Don't bow down whenever you want. No, it's you. I can put my head down 1,000 times. Will that affect the Eibishter's coming down? I cannot make these things up. So only where Chazal said to do it, you do it. And when do we do it? Only in the first bracha of the Shemona Esrei, twice, both Tchila and Soif. And by Moedim, Tchila v'Soif. That's it. And Hashoicheach al kol bracha bracha. If a person says, you know what, I'm going to be mach, I'm going to bow down at the end of every bracha. Don't do that. Why not? So he brings, so the Charedim brings from Bavli, from Perek Einoimdim, from Atoisvis, he says two things. First of all, there will be no rabbinic enactment. Everyone is going to come and say, I'm machmir. And number two, you look like a show-off. However, there are exceptions. Rabbi Yitzchak ben Nachman b'shem Rabbi Levi says, hold on, Kohen Gadol, yes, shoicheach al soif kol bracha bracha. And the melech even more. The melech has to bow down, roish kol bracha bracha, v'soif kol bracha bracha. Why? So the last Charedim and the Amid brings from Rashi and Bavli, kol shuhu gadol b'yoser tzarech lachnil lahashmal atzmai. The greater you are, the more you have to bow down. In other words, the bowing down, that's mamshech, godliness, only happens 4 times. First, tchila v'soif, moedim tchila v'soif. That's the cheftzit. Now we're speaking about the gavra. You want to humble yourself. The greater you think you are, the more you have to humble yourself. Says the Gemara, Rab Simon b'shem Rab Shimon Levi. I'll tell you more. Hamelach, he doesn't bow down tchila v'soif. He stays bowed down the whole time. Hamelach kishu mishu kareya. When are you kareya? The first time, David, at the beginning of Shemona Esrei. Eino niskav at shuhu mashkum kol tfilasoi. He will not straighten up his body until he finishes the whole Shemona Esrei. And my Tama, what's my source? So I'm bringing a pasuk from Malachim. Dorten that says Malachim Aleph that Shlomo HaMelech had a big tefillah that he said when he inaugurated the Beis Hamikdash, and it says Vayikech Haloi Shlomo Lispalel Hashem Eis Kol HaTefillah Es Kol HaTchina Azois. Then it says, Kom Elifnei Mizbach Hashem. Then he stood up from having knelt, Mikroya al Birka, from having knelt on his knees before the Mizbeach, mashma, that during the entire tefillah he was kneeling. He was bowing. Oh, now that we mentioned this pasuk, so now to be aware of the following. The words here is Mikroya al Birka, kneeling on his knees. Whatever you think, whatever you have in your mind is lav dafka the way it was, kneeling on his knees. When Divrei Hayamim quotes the same event, instead of using the words that King Solomon was Mikroya al Birkov, it says Vayivrach al Birkov, which also means he knelt on his knees. But you have Kriya and you have Bricha. So we want to know Ezu Kriya ve'ezu Bricha. What's the difference? Now, before we learn the Yerushalmi, let's go back, guys. We learned this in Bavli Brachas. And let me tell you the words in Bavli, and there's 2 machloikas in between the Yerushalmi and the Bavli. There's not that much time, which is technical, but it's good to know, at least get to hear the words. In the Bavli, the Gemara says, Kriya means al birkayim, to kneel on your knees. The word kida, there's no bricha in Bavli. It's kriya. Kida is that difficult bowing down where you're standing on your feet, you're going down to the point that you're going to be able to kiss the ground, but you will only support yourself with your thumbs and not on your hands. And when you get up, so what if a person is on his hands, again, he's not on his knees, he's just standing and he's on his hands, then to get up, they can push off, a push-up. But if you're only using your thumbs, you have a lot less power coming from your thumbs. You really have to put all of the power on your thighs. That is something we'll get that Levi made that demonstration, as it says in the Bavli, and he got hurt. And then Ishtachava. Ishtachava means Pishut Yadayim V'Raglayim. You're fully flat on your stomach and you're extending your hands and your feet. Wow. So in the Bavli, you have Kriya, Kida, and Ishtachava. Yerushalmi does not mention. In the Yerushalmi, we're going to have Bricha, Kriya, Ishtachava. Bricha, Kriya, Ishtachava. The word Kida is not mentioned, so the Charedim will argue that Kriya is Kida. Now you heard these words. But here again, the question is, sometimes we use the words that someone was kneeling, kriya, kneeling, bricha, which one is which? So we're going to first read what we have in the Yerushalmi. Then we're going to read that the Charedim has the opposite nusach, which is extremely significant, and the Shinun Eschais also has the opposite nusach. So whoever's watching on the Zoom came in as a great picture of Pishut Yadayim V'Raglayim. That's called the Ishtachava. Now, Rab Chia, Rabbi, the great Rab Chia, demonstrated a bricha in front of Rebbe. And when he made that demonstration, v'nifsach, he became lame, something became dislocated, Abed v'nisrape, God healed him. However, when Levi Bar Sisi showed a kriya in front of Rebbe, v'nifsach, not only did he get injured, but he never healed from it. So if you look inside the Shinun Nuschayis, he changes what Rab Chia and what Rab Levi did. He changes it. Now, our text in the Yerushalmi, you would argue, the one who never recuperated, why did he never recuperate? Because he did something that's harder. Right? That would fit. Bericha means you get on your knees. Kriya means kida. In the Yerushalmi, kriya means kida. On your thumbs. However, the Charedim has the opposite nusach. And I want to read Natav. Koloimer, what is it? What's bricha? What's kriya? The head of the name, Rab Chia made a kriya. Rab Chia did the kriya. Kriya in the Yerushalmi is a kida. And the Levi only showed the bricha. No, it's Levi did the easier, the opposite. So we're going to go with the Charedim. He's right. Now, Masechtas Megillah Perek Shlishi. In Masechtas Megillah Perek Shlishi, Maisa the Levi Achve Kida. In Bavli it says Kida. Kame Rabbi v'itla. He became lame. Upeidish Rashi. Guys, the Charedim will make it clear. Kida and Kriya is the same thing in the Yerushalmi. There's Bricha, which is the easiest. Kriya / Kida and Ishtachava. Achre Kida, what did he do? Noyetz Goydlov. He stuck his thumbs on the ground. He leaned on his thumbs. Vishoichen, he leaned. You know how far down? Yaakov, that's a stretch. Asher Noishek Harisva, he was able to kiss the ground. Standing on your feet, not your fingers should touch your toes. No, kiss the ground. Vizoikev, and then stand up when you're only on your thumbs. Since your thumbs cannot support your body. You can't use your hands to push up. So therefore, you have to use your thighs, your muscles on your legs. Then he got wounded. Buka means the socket between the leg and the thigh. It came out and he never got hit. That is in the Bible. Here, what the Charedim wants to point out is we have a whole different story. Story was like this. The harder, the Kida, which is called Kriya, Rab Chia demonstrated. Levi only showed the Bricha. And Levi got so wounded that he never recuperated. Why? That's the whole thing. We had this in the Megillah. What we had in the Megillah, another whole version, that during a fast day, Levi said words that sounded disrespectful. And the Charedim quotes it. He told the Eibishter that the Yidden was mamish, there was no water. So he tells God that you God went up to the heavens. You stopped looking at your children. He said very chutzpahdik words to God. So the first line under the Gemara in the Charedim. So the Gemara says over there in Megillah, what really happened was he said these words. So when he did something that had some danger, he got a punishment. In other words, it's not because he did something difficult. That the Charedim is trying to point out that our version is correct. Rab Chia did the hard demonstration. Whatever Bricha means, if it means just falling on your knees and getting up, which is a lot easier than Kriya, Levi got punished because he deserved to get punished for his madreg. God waited for him to make a Bricha. You can make a Bricha, you can do something of little significance, and God forbid you can get wounded. You can do something very dangerous, very difficult, and not get wounded or get healed. It has nothing to do with Begashmus. It's all Beruchnis. Listen, we have to be very careful when we repeat, we should use the words of the Rebbe, not add to it. In other words, Levi was complaining to God. Complaining to God, the Rebbe said we have to complain to God because of the Golos. We have to do because the Rebbe said. We have to demand from God. But we have to know we're playing with fire.
According to
According to this explanation, the Charedim, do we understand that the Yerushalmi is arguing on the Babli in
Clearly.
what Levi did?
Mamish, clear. It's 5 to 7. There's
Okay.
a machloikas, Babli, Yerushalmi. First of all, the words. There's two machloikas. The words. In the Babli, you don't have the words bricha, Danny. In Babli, it's kriya, kida, hishtachava. In the Yerushalmi, it's bricha, kriya, hishtachava. The middle one is the hard one. The first one is relatively easy. Now I want to add to that. What do we do today in Shemona Esrei? You think about it. I want to go with the Yerushalmi. What does bericha mean? Falling on your knees. What do we do in Shemona Esrei? We do bericha and kriya, not full. We do bericha means when we say baruch, we bend our knees. Bericha. And then when we do ato, what do? We begin doing a kida. We begin doing a kriya. We don't do hishtachava. Mamish, bericha, kriya. Even the words fit. Bericha is the knees. You're bending your knees in. And then you're doing a kriya, you're bowing down. And then we get up before we say God's name, as we'll learn tomorrow in the sugya. But let's keep it right now. It says in Malachim v'kapa. This is King Solomon's hands when he got up from his prayer. Word Perusay Hashemayim, they were spread heavenward. So there's a machlekes. What does that mean? Menakotza lakotza. Omar Rab Aivu. It doesn't mean like this. You know, people daven and they open up. No, that's a very arrogant stance. Does not mean that. It means the opposite. Kegoin hodein nagdim. Hoya oimed. The Charedim teaches the word nagdim is someone who's arthritic. Someone who has arthritis has a very difficult time moving their limbs. It means he opens his hands very little. It was a stand up like this, humility, not like this. Because he was humble. That's why he kneeled to begin with. However, Amar Rabbi Elazar bar Avina, the opposite. No, it means that he opened up his hands the way you imagine it. That what? Kakapayim halolu, he spread his hands. Why did he spread his hands? Because he was making a statement to the people, not to God. That he did not receive anything. See my hands? You see it's empty? I built this building. Ich hab garnish genommen. That's what he was saying. Okay, Gaval. Now that we spoke about bowing down, let's. I have a few more minutes. Now listen to this. Guys, we have to learn this properly. There's two dinim we're learning now, and if I stand to be corrected, but I understand the sugya this way. First of all, when the Shliach Tzibur repeats the Shemona Esrei, before we introduce Moedim D'Rabbanan, al derech, when you go into a shul and the kahal is saying Shema Yisrael, you have to say Shema Yisrael. Me being silent when everyone is saying Shema is an indication that maybe I'm not with the tzibur. It's like the first topic of today's daf. It's like as a mara sign. When the Shliach Tzibur bows down, everyone has to bow down with it. That's the first statement. That hakoil shoychachim ima Shliach Tzibur bohido, says Rab Zayda, that is only in the moedim in the beginning. But we learned before, when do we bow down in the bracha of moedim? In the beginning, and then at the end, Baruch Atah Hashem, right? That God is good. There, you don't have to bow down. Ubulvad b'moedim, and not at the end. Aber now the Gemara says, hold on. You only bow down in the beginning, not at the end. That's if you don't include the topic of moedim d'Rabbanan. Now that we're going to introduce that when the Shliach Tzibur says moedim, we have to say moedim also. We call that moedim d'Rabbanan. We have to bow down according to the Charedim. That Rebbe did it this way. From the beginning until the end. When we say moedim, we say it bow down from the beginning until the end. And what Rab Zayda did was, Rab Zayda said moedim d'Rabbanan ois geschlept, that when he came to the end of moedim d'Rabbanan, the Baal Tefillah was concluding the Birchas Moedim. So it turned out that he was bowed down with the Shliach Tzibur in the beginning and at the end. Oh, Rab Zayda, even though he paskin that the bowing down, if you are silent with the Shliach Tzibur, is only in the beginning of Moedim, not at the end. But now let's throw Moedim in the equation. I want to add one Abu Draham. We spoke this out when we learned this topic in Soik. Soik Daf Mem is the Bavli's topic of Moedim d'Rabbanan. We spoke it in the intro why we call it d'Rabbanan. Question is, why do we b'chal say it? So the Abu Dhram says, why do we have a Shliach Tzibur? We have a Shliach Tzibur because not everyone knows how to daven. So he's davening on everyone's behalf. A thank you, you have to give yourself. A moedim, I cannot have someone else say thank you on my behalf. You want to say thank you, you say thank you. And it's a big thank you. It's a Jewish thank you. So Rab Zayda, Sevar lekoroiva. he would wait. The word Kareiva is a Shliach Tzibur. The Shliach Tzibur brings everyone close to God. If he knows how to daven nicely, he's called the Kareiva. So he attempted to schlep out his moedim, mamish, when the Shliach Tzibur is saying the whole moedim, until the Allah Koil, until the end. Rab Zayda, he said the moedim the Rabbanan, Kedei lo shu achim aytchil avasayif. Now that we introduce moedim the Rabbanan, so now the Gemara says, at least we'll open up now. Rabbi Yasa, when he came here from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, he walks into a shul, and mitamal, he sees up Yerushalmis, meaning people that live in Israel. That what were they doing? That chamsin, gachanin, umalachshin, that they're bowing down during Moedim, and they're whispering, they're murmuring. So Armaloin, so Rabbi Yasa says, what are you guys doing during Shemona Esrei? And why is everyone bowing down and murmuring? Right? Ma dein lechisha. He asked that question. Asks the Gemara on Rabbi Yasa. You Babylonian, what do you mean? You're asking, what, don't you know Moedim the Rabbanan? How don't you know that? Don't you know? Now, Rab Chelbe, really, we're going to have 4 versions. Let's just read the first version. This Rab Shimon is all in, Rab Chelbe brought it. That Rab Shimon, b'shem Rabbi Yechon, b'shem Rabbi Yirmiyah. And Rab Chanina, b'shem Rabbi Yosha. And Rab Chia, b'shem Rab Simoy. And other people say that it was the Chevra, b'shem Rab Simoy. That's the first version of Moedim. We're going to have 4 versions. The first one is Moedim anachnu lach. This is what everyone has to say, their own personal thank you, while the Shliach Tzibur is saying Moedim. Adon Kol Abriya is the master of the creatures. Elokatush Bacha is God of praises. Tzurei Lamim Barak of the worlds. Chayo Elam, the life of eternity. Yotzei B'Reish is the former of the beginning of the creation. Machaya Mesim. Shechayonu v'kiyam tonu v'zikisonu v'siyam tonu v'kavan lo'idu shimcha baruch Hashem keloi dois. They have another version, Abba, which is really Rab Abba, Bar Zavdu b'shem Rav, a different version. Moedem anachnu lach she'anu chayom lo'idus lach l'shimcha terarenu sfasai ki azamru lach v'nafshe shepodisa baruch Hashem keloi dois. We're going to stop over here. The Gemara is going to bring 2 other versions. We're going to have a total of 4 versions. In other words, so many Amoraim had their girsa of how to say Moedim the Rabbanan. The kasha will be, how can you, Rabbi Yesa, be wondering when you walk into a shul in Eretz Yisrael, what are people bowing and murmuring? Don't you know, Moedim the Rabbanan? We'll leave with the kasha to be continued.
Yeah. Rabbi.
Yeah, okay, we'll speak more.
If you see in these versions that they're changing the girsa, how does that fit with what you said before about the nevuah?
No, Moedim the Rabbanan. I said in the intro, Danny, that it's called the Rabbanan because it was not made by nevuah. It was not made by the Achik Nasai Doyle.
Okay, fine. What about all the different girsais in the Nusach?
That's why we don't touch it.
So the Spartan that has 7 different Nuschais.